For a moment or two, he makes sense. His thoughts are concise, meaningful, intelligent. Then abruptly his eyes shift, quickly, left, right. He begins to talk in the third person, rambling incoherently, lost in a mind we don't understand. Tate Ormiston is a schizophrenic. He has spent most of his adult life confined to the Riverview Psychiatric Hospital in Coquitlam. On Friday, March 26, Tate was released from Riverview, not because his psychiatrists, social workers, or parents recommended his discharge, but simply because Tate asked to go. In fact, all those who know Tate best desperately want his treatment to continue at Riverview. But despite the unanimous recommendations of the experts, the Riverview Review Panel accommodated Tate's request for leave. The panel is a quasi-judicial body, with 3 members who ultimately make the final decision on whether or not a patient is released. Wayne Brady is the co-coordinating chairperson of the tribunal. He explains how a patient like Tate can legally bypass his doctor's recommendations for committal.
When the institution or the attending physician doesn't feel the patient's ready for discharge, but the patient and or their representatives do, then they make an application for a review panel hearing. At that time, we can, in fact, discharge a patient, whether or not the attending physician agrees.
He says the panel must also take into consideration the patient's legal options under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and how those rights are enforced despite the patient's condition.
10 years ago, we may well say, for your best interest, you should remain in the hospital. Now, would that be defensible under the Charter? Is a person entitled to their liberty? And is it up to us to say, yes, but their lifestyle is bizarre? Who are we to say where a mentally disordered person should be? And keep in mind, what is a bizarre behavior in, well, for want of a better place, Penticton, is quite acceptable in downtown Vancouver.
But a number of outpatient support groups look at the release question in a much different light. The British Columbia Schizophrenic Society is gravely concerned over the downsizing of Riverview and the growing number of Tates being discharged. Sheila Taylor is the downsizing representative for the society, and she says Riverview's mandate to reduce their number of beds by another 105 will be disastrous. She has a great deal of experience dealing with Riverview, as her son has spent nearly 25 years in the facility, he too suffering from schizophrenia. And she maintains more often than not, patients are discharged with little more than a bottle of antipsychotic pills and a list of hostels and cheap hotels.
They are not patient-oriented. They are trying to be. They think they're working very hard at it. It's pathetic. They've got an awfully long way to go.
When an outpatient like Tate is confronted with his newfound freedom, his choices of accommodation are very limited. In Vancouver alone, he will find at least 500 other mentally ill people, mostly schizophrenics, awaiting decent housing. And in many cases, their accommodation is the street, under a bridge, or inside a disposal container. One of the few housing projects designed for people such as Tate is the Lookout Emergency Aid Society. Executive Director Karen O'Shaughnessy says, however, that their facility cannot even come close to accommodating the sheer numbers of mentally ill homeless.
We turn away 100 people, over 100 people per month. Where do they go? Our beds are the last beds. So they're on the street, right? And well, in here, they're in Stanley Park. They're everywhere now.
And while she has found emergency shelter for Tate, Karen is, like most others, concerned for his safety and well-being. Simply put, she feels he should not be out on his own.
Review panel lets him go, and where does he end up? Down here. And the problem is that we know that he's also incredibly vulnerable. You know, he gets abused while he's down here. He doesn't have the insight in what's happening with him and the ability to look after himself. And so everybody is constantly intervening on his behalf to make sure that he's going to make it. And he is going to be a statistic. We see too many suicides here. We see too many deaths.
To prevent such tragedies, outpatients must take their medication, usually administered through the Lower Mainland's various mental health clinics. Although he's only 26, Tate looks much older, due in part to the variety and heavy doses of drugs he must consume. He explains his current regimen.
Side effect pill 3 times a day and a long-acting antipsychotic medication injection once every 2 weeks.
But the mentally ill will inevitably either forget to take their medication or simply stop taking it. And that's one of the major problems with outpatient therapy. There is no effective system in place to monitor their drug intake. Tate says unless he administers his medication daily, he starts becoming deluded.
I just sort of laugh and that and talk to myself. It doesn't happen that often, but sometimes I do.
Above and beyond the enormous problems of poverty, lack of housing, drug and alcohol abuse, and many others, very few deinstitutionalized people have any remaining contact with family. In fact, less than 10%. Tate is one of the lucky ones. His folks in White Rock visit him regularly. Sheila Taylor tells how sad it can be.
It's pathetic because, some of these people come up to you and say, their mother's coming today, and you look at them and you know that their mother or father has long gone.
With the continued downsizing of Riverview and a healthcare system already stretched to the limit, our streets will undoubtedly become home to more and more people unable to cope with everyday life. As for Tate, he has temporary shelter and is at least being looked after.
I'm going to stay more in a supervised setting so that I won't find myself deteriorating.
Our support system has shown there are no quick fixes or easy solutions for Tate or others like him. Perhaps their peace of mind is simply knowing someone else cares. I'm Dave Jackson reporting.
Trading, Paul speaking.
And trade he does. For 30-year-old Paul Kuhn, an average day may consist of fielding more than 100 calls from investors wishing to buy or sell stocks. As an equity trader for a discount brokerage house, he deals in volume. Greenline Investments is the Toronto Dominion Bank's brokerage firm, and because they're not allowed to advise clients on what stock options to buy, their investors have to manage their own accounts. That means much lower commissions for their customers and, as a result, more business. He explains because today's investor is more hands-on than ever before, he has to service a larger client base.
Basically, sit down and pump out the calls. But of course, that's the only way you can deal with the public in terms of the volume we're doing, especially these days on the exchanges.
Since Paul has been with Greenline for less than 6 months, he says the hectic pace has made him a better broker.
The exciting thing is doing that many trades in a very short period of time. I, for instance, have gained a great deal of experience trading on the many different markets. That is Toronto, Montreal, New York, Calgary, and Vancouver.
For Paul, the challenge of succeeding in the competitive world of high finance was fostered as a young teenager when he often managed his mother's small art gallery in her absence. He says a great deal of his entrepreneurial spirit was formed as a young man working in the rugged BC wilderness.
I was in the tree planting business, silviculture as it's known in BC. I was a tree planter, soon became a foreman, and then I became a contractor and a project supervisor. Exciting job, essentially a guy in the bush with a briefcase and a rusty pickup truck. A lot of fun, and hopefully I did some good for the environment.
But the physical and mental strain of months in the forest was beginning to take its toll. He explains how BCIT seemed like the natural evolution in progressing into finance.
I was in my late 20s, and I wanted to get a job. And I no longer had faith in university as a place to go and get an education and get a job. So I decided to go to BCIT. My experience in business led me to think about financial management. As well, I wanted to become a player in the stock market, having taken the securities course prior to that. So I decided to study financial management at BCIT.
After graduating in May of 1993, he landed the job at Greenline less than a month later. He does offer advice, however, when it comes to applying for a position upon graduation. In a word, it's confidence.
Into the interview, knowing I was qualified, I left the interview saying to myself, if they didn't hire me for the job, they're fools.
But he feels the job is anything but an entry-level position, despite the fact a discount house like Greenline does not have research facilities and therefore by law cannot offer market advice. He can help out clients in technical matters involving stock transactions. Paul describes the wide variety of equities he deals in every day.
Buy and sell stocks and bonds, mutual funds, debentures, money market instruments such as GICs, bankers' acceptances, commercial paper, T-bills for the general public.
Although he's been trading on the VSE for a relatively short time, he doesn't think the negative publicity surrounding the exchange is necessarily warranted. While he admits there are some unscrupulous characters involved in the market, he feels the VSE offers certain financial advantages over other exchanges.
I think the VSE offers a very great opportunity to people in the venture capital industry. It is a unique market in the world for raising venture capital for businesses.
His motivation for success is simple. He says with hard work, the sky's the limit, and with any luck, retire early and perhaps fix up an old boat. And he's glad now the only bears he sees are on the trading floor. Dave Jackson, CFML News. With CFML Sports to 7:05. The Canucks will be facing off at the Pacific Coliseum against Quebec in about half an hour, and fans will get their first look at newly acquired centerman Jimmy Carson. The former 50-goal scorer is expected to center a line with Pavel Bure and Sergio Momesso. Defenseman Gerald Diduck is expected to be out of the Canucks lineup for about 3 weeks with a stress fracture to his foot, and the call to Hamilton has brought up Russian rookie John Nemesnikov to fill in. In other games underway with play in the third period at the Meadowlands, Montreal leads New Jersey 3-1. Vincent Damphus, Benoit Brunet, and Kirk Muller for the Habs. Tommy Albaline has the lone Devils marker. Also in the third, it's Tampa Bay in front of Detroit 3-2. The Lightning are coming off a big win over the Rangers in New York Monday night. And Buffalo is up 2-1 over the Jets in Winnipeg, with play in the second period. The rest of the slate are all 7:35 starts. Hartford is in L.A., and San Jose visits the Mighty Ducks in Anaheim. There's been a couple of additions to next week's NHL All-Star Game. Center Alexei Yashin of Ottawa and right-wingers Joe Mullen of Pittsburgh and Russ Courtnall of Dallas have been added to the All-Star rosters. Yashin and Mullen will play for the East squad, while Courtnall will lace them up for the West. There's a new twist to the attack last week on U.S. figure skater Nancy Kerrigan. The FBI is investigating allegations the husband and bodyguard of rival figure skater Tonya Harding plotted the attack on Kerrigan. A Portland, Oregon private eye says a clergyman came to him for advice after hearing an alleged tape recording of the two talking about hiring a hitman. A law enforcement source in Washington says charges are pending. Meanwhile, skater Tonya Harding was reportedly has canceled a flight to Fairfax, Virginia, where she was to take part in a pre-Olympic exhibition. However, a spokesperson for the event's promoter says the skater has backed out. They say Harding told her that she's currently having, quote, a few media problems. And here's another story that makes it look like it's open season on athletes. Police say a member of a Hamburg, Germany soccer team was stabbed today by a woman during an indoor tournament in Stuttgart. Oliver Mueller, an amateur under contract with the Hamburg club, was stabbed as he sat in the players' section of the stands. A woman yielding a 20-centimeter kitchen knife was arrested. Mueller is being treated in hospital, but his injuries are not considered serious. Last year was Reggie Jackson as the solo inductee into baseball's Hall of Fame. This year, Steve Carlton will be the only one going to Cooperstown. The four-time Cy Young winner received over 90% of the votes cast by the Baseball Writers of America and will be inducted into the Hall on July 31st. Orlando Cepeda was the sentimental choice for induction, but fell just 7 votes short on his 15th and final attempt. The Indianapolis Colts have hired former Chicago Bears defensive coordinator Vince Tobin. He formerly held that job with the Colts, who last week hired his brother Bill as vice president and director of football operations. Bill Tobin fired 5 assistant coaches earlier this week, but retained Ted Marchibroda as head coach. And that's sports to 7:10. Our next report at 8:05 on CFML 104.5. Good evening, I'm Dave Jackson with CFML Sports to 8:05. The FBI is investigating allegations that the husband of figure skater Tonya Harding and her bodyguard were involved in last week's attack on Tonya's rival, Nancy Kerrigan. Kerrigan was struck on the leg after a practice session and forced to withdraw from the U.S. Olympic trials in Detroit. The International Committee of the U.S. figure skating team named Kerrigan to the team, But a report by NBC News says Harding's bodyguard and husband were involved in the conspiracy. ABC's Hal Lamb is in Detroit, where police will eventually hold a news conference.
A mass of reporters have gathered at police headquarters in downtown Detroit. They expect officials to reveal the latest developments in the attack on Olympic figure skater Nancy Kerrigan. Skating rival Tonya Harding abruptly canceled a trip to Virginia after learning her husband and bodyguard are under investigation for allegedly hiring a, quote, hitman from Arizona. That information published in the Oregonian newspaper. Earlier, the FBI in Washington state said it would announce arrests in the case, but has now canceled a news conference. The next move belongs to Detroit police, who say they're waiting. For what, they won't say. Hal Lamb, ABC News, Detroit.
With play in the first period, it's 2-0 Canucks over Quebec. Gino Ojic with his 13th and Pavel Bure on a 35-foot blast from just inside the Nord's blue line. 2-0 Canucks. That one's near the end of the first. Both teams right now have injury problems. For the Canucks, Cliff Ronning, Gerald Diddick, Greg Adams, and Dane Jackson are all on the shelf. The Nords are missing power forward Owen Nolan, who has played in only 6 games all year. The Montreal Canadiens continue their winning ways tonight. Steve McCormick reports from the Forum in Montreal.
The Canadiens extended their unbeaten streak to 7 games by scoring a 3-2 win over the Devils. Montreal held a 2-0 lead after one, despite playing close to half the period short-handed. Vincent D'Anfos opened the scoring with his 17th, and Benoit Brunet gave the Habs a 2-goal lead in the last minute of the first. Jim Dowd made it a 3-2 game early in the third, but that's as close as New Jersey would get. The Devils couldn't score on any of their 8 power play opportunities. Tommy Albaline had his first for New Jersey, Kurt Muller his 9th on the power play for Montreal. The Canadiens make it 7 straight without a loss with a 3-2 win over the Devils. Steve McCormack, Montreal.
John Tucker had a goal and an assist as the Tampa Bay Lightning beat the Detroit Red Wings 4-2 at the Joe Louis Arena. The loss was just the second in 15 games for the Wings. Sean Chambers, Chris Joseph, and Denny Savard had the other Tampa Bay markers. Nicholas Lindstrom and Ray Shepard replied for the Wings. In a game still underway in the third period, it's Buffalo over Winnipeg 2-1 in Winnipeg. And Hartford and L.A. are just underway, as well as San Jose and Anaheim. Both no scores in the first period. The associate coach of Canada's Olympic hockey team says there's no prejudice when it comes to picking the squad. The team has been criticized for not having any players from Quebec on the roster, a decision associate coach Danny Dubé says was made on the basis of skill and not language. Dubé ignited a storm of criticism in Quebec for saying Francophone players could only make the Olympic team as goal scorers and lack defensive skill. A quick rundown of the scores in the NBA tonight. It was Houston 94, Boston 84, Philadelphia 117, the LA Clippers 98, Atlanta got by Chicago 92-81. It was Cleveland over the Orlando Magic 118-109, Indiana 107, the Denver Nuggets 96. It was Minnesota 103 over Dallas 85, and Miami is at Golden State. That game is just underway. Now that's the sports to 8:10. Our next report at 9:05 on CFML 104.5. Good evening. I'm Dave Jackson with CFML Sports to 9:05. Detroit police would confirm little information other than an investigation with the FBI was ongoing into last week's attack on figure skater Nancy Kerrigan. Detroit Police Chief Benny Napoleon tells reporters there will be no charges filed tonight.
I'm happy that we were all able to work together, that there appears to be a coming to a head of this case, and that we can put it all behind us and move on.
Napoleon would not comment on an NBC report that figure skater Tonya Harding's bodyguard has confessed to participating in a plot to injure Kerrigan. But NBC News is quoting unidentified sources as saying the weapon has been recovered in a dumpster found behind the ice rink where Kerrigan was attacked last Thursday after practice. Napoleon responds to reporters' questions.
A mass of reporters have gathered at police headquarters in downtown Detroit. They expect officials to reveal the latest developments in the attack on Olympic figure skater Nancy Kerrigan. Skating rival Tonya Harding abruptly canceled a trip to Virginia after learning her husband and bodyguard are under investigation for allegedly hiring a, quote, hitman from Arizona. That information published in the Oregonian newspaper. Earlier, the FBI in Washington state said it would announce arrests in the case, but has now canceled a news conference. The next move belongs to Detroit police, who say they're waiting. For what, they won't say. Hal Lamb, ABC News, Detroit.
Here's a quick look at what's happening in the NHL tonight. The Canucks have a 3-2 lead over Quebec midway through the second period. Pavel Bure with a couple of beauties and Gino Odjick have scored for the Canucks. Ian Fraser has both Nordique goals. The Winnipeg Jets pulled off a third come-from-behind victory over the Buffalo Sabres. They are currently 4 points behind, 4 points out of the last playoff spot, a 3-2 win for Winnipeg. The Montreal Canadiens remain undefeated in 7 as they edged the New Jersey Devils 3-2 in Montreal. The Tampa Bay Lightning have pulled off their second straight road win. Monday night they surprised the Rangers. Tonight they doubled the Red Wings 3-2. John Tucker led the Lightning with a goal and an assist. In other games in progress, Hartford and LA are tied up at 1 in the second period. Wayne Gretzky has his 2400th career point in that one. And San Jose leads the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim 3-1, also in the second period. Quick rundown of the scores in the NBA tonight. It was the Houston Rockets 94, Boston Celtics 84. It was Philadelphia 117-98 over the LA Clippers. Atlanta Hawks 92, Chicago Bulls 81. Cleveland 118, Orlando 109. It was the Indiana Pacers tripping up the Denver Nuggets 107-96. Minnesota Timberwolves with a rare win, beating the lowly Dallas Mavericks 103-85. Miami is at Golden State down the road. Quarterback Jeff Hostetler of the LA Raiders is the NFL's Offensive Player of the Week. He threw for 294 yards in the Raiders' 42-24 playoff win over Denver on Sunday. Green Bay quarterback George Teague is the league's top defensive player for helping the Packers quell Detroit. And Kansas City's Keith Cash is the special teams winner. And finally, the NFL expansion Carolina Panthers have hired Bill Polian as general manager. Polian is credited with turning the Buffalo Bills into an AFC power. And that's sports to 9:09, brought to you by the Campus Cafe. Our next report, The Major, at 10:10 on CFML 104.5. In Clayoquot Sound, a better question might be, does anyone agree? 10 months after the so-called Clayoquot Compromise was announced by the NDP government, the sabers are still rattling between environmentalists and the forest industry. The Clayoquot land use decision increased the proportion of protected land area from 15 to 33%, but did not satisfy environmental groups like the Western Canada Wilderness Committee. Paul George is the organization's founder and executive chairman and contradicts the Forest Ministry's figures.
Numbers are bogus. Basically, it's 2/3 of the existing forest, the still natural oak-growth forest, they confined to clear-cut logging. And what they did is they included water and everything else in those statistics. They did a lot of juggling, and a lot of those special management areas are completely nuked, so to speak.
But the forest industry stands by its numbers. Dan Jepson is manager of forestry for the Association of BC Professional Foresters. He says it doesn't make sense for the government or the logging companies to distort the timber harvesting figures.
If there's different numbers, I'd certainly like to see what they are and see how he explains what his numbers are. But I would have to go with the numbers that I know, that I've seen. And those numbers aren't just drafted up by a McMillan-Bloedel forester or a Ministry of Forester. There's probably 100 different people who develop the numbers, and if you know how things work, you don't get 100 people together to agree to lie about something as important as that.
Jepson also goes on to say that 50 cents of every dollar produced in BC is directly or indirectly generated by forestry. He says the various proposals he's seen from environmental groups to massively reduce logging would devastate the provincial economy. But George explains there is an inherently greater value in leaving Clayoquot Sound pristine.
We have the largest chunk of low-elevation, old-growth temperate rainforest left in the world there. It's only logical that to keep it in as much of it intact as possible makes it more valuable in the future. And there were studies that said we'd get more jobs from tourism over the long run than by cutting it down. And that was ignored by the government.
As the sound of chainsaws now echoes throughout the Clayoquot, So echoes the cries of protesters still camped out near several logging roads. And while the arrests and convictions for blocking the roads have diminished, George says the spirits of those opposed to the logging have not. Dave Jackson, CFML News. The image of the traditional pool hall is ingrained in our minds, either from misspent teen years or movies like The Hustler. Light years away from the smoky back alley joints of Fast Eddie Felsen and Minnesota Fats are the trendy billiard rooms of Vancouver's Yaletown. Jonathan Coleman is owner of the brand new Bar None on Hamilton Street. This trendy night spot features brick walls, designer artwork, and 4 top-of-the-line Olhausen billiard tables. He says it's high time the image and atmosphere of pool playing was improved.
No one's ever catered to that type of person because I always figured the pool halls were scuzzy and for gamblers and they're smoky and that. Well, they're not. I mean, where do you find pool tables? You find them in wealthy people's houses, right?
Maybe it's just a fad, but according to Linda Schulten, an organizer in the First Women's Snooker League, these new billiard rooms are more comfortable than singles bars and a lot more fun, especially when she beats the guys. Dave Jackson, CFML News. On March 8th, BC Racing Commission chairperson Carolyn Askew announced horse racing at X Park was here to stay. But a group of owners, breeders, and trainers are less than happy with the decision, and they say they may try to finance the construction of their own track. The Horsemen's Benevolent Association has lobbied the Government and Racing Commission since 1988 to build a new 1-mile track in Delta. They say X Park is outdated, too small, and too dangerous to horse and jockey. Thus, a world-class city like Vancouver deserves a state-of-the-art facility. Association Secretary-Treasurer Bryant McAfee says they were never consulted by the government into exploring alternative sites. And they don't buy the Commission's argument the new track proposal would not have met Delta's zoning requirements.
I hear comments about environmental, I hear comments about Delta Council and so forth, and I certainly don't believe everything I read and I don't believe everything I hear.
While McAfee admits the Commission's decision is final, he says there's still plenty of fight left in many of his members. Dave Jackson, Vancouver. If you love dinosaurs, and who doesn't, get ready for a multimedia extravaganza featuring thunder lizards, something called a Zungaripterus, and the adorable star of the show, Gobi the Dinosaur. The Dinosaur World Tour, the greatest show on Earth, is premiering May 14th in Edmonton, then moves on to Toronto, and later San Francisco and Japan. A Vancouver date is yet to be set. Greg Sullivan is Director of Animation for Studio B Productions, one of the 3 Vancouver companies producing the show. He explains what it's all about.
It's bigger than the King Tut exhibition that traveled around. It's going to be a 27,000 square foot exhibit where they lead you through. They show all the theories of why the dinosaurs were, how the dinosaurs lived, what happened, how they do that. There's going to be hands-on things. We're going to have fossils.
He also says his company has spent a lot of time and money researching the project, and he's 100% sure it'll be a huge success. Why? Simply put, it's the dinosaurs. Kids and adults are just plain nuts about them. Dave Jackson, CFML News. In 1967, Vancouver enacted its first motor vehicle noise abatement bylaw. 25 years later, hundreds of mostly young people cruise up and down Robson Street on weekend nights, their car stereos blasting with little or no regard for the anti-noise bylaw. And there are strong opinions from people who live and work along Robson to get police to crack down on the noise and congestion problem.
I mean, don't these guys have anything better to do than cruise up and down the streets, annoying people with their loud, tasteless music? I mean, if it was up to me, I think the bylaw should be a lot tougher now, so these guys should get tickets and fines and that sort of thing.
It's a pain in the butt. Can't these people get a life?
But Constable Reg Harris says Vancouver police are doing everything in their power to enforce the bylaw.
The officers have been updated with respect to the new bylaw that came into effect last year. They're taking any enforcement actions against violators that they should happen to witness.
Thumping stereos are annoying to many, but for those who make a living driving downtown, the bumper-to-bumper traffic on Robson really makes life miserable. And according to pizza driver Dave Gurrell, the city's recent no-turn policy is no solution.
It doesn't work. All you do is divert the problem onto Denman Street or Alberta Street or some other street. You don't get rid of the problem that way. You just divert it somewhere else.
So while the high-decibel partiers continue to ignore the bylaw, the fines, and the traffic, those who work and live in the area cannot. Dave Jackson, CFML News.